So we're going to bake this rock, the lighting and stuff in Blender and then import it into AltspaceVR. So I'm going to assume that you have some knowledge with Blender. So this is not like a how to use Blender guide, it's assuming you already know what you're doing. So you'll already have your model, in this case a rock. You'll not change to the cycles renderer, unless you want to use the Blender renderer, that's entirely up to you, but in this one we'll be going through with cycles. Don't need to change any of the settings yet. You'll want to split your view so you have the node editor to set up your materials, and later will be, don't need that, or 3. So add a new material and you'll see you've got the basic nodes for that in the editor. So I'll zoom in on that. So with how the baking is done in cycles, both the materials in here and the lighting will be baked to the final texture. So we'll just add a basic text, just a procedural texture of some sort. So texture coordinates, texture, just a binary object, it's a vector. Again, I'm assuming you have some knowledge of how to use Blender and its materials. Let's have a look at it. That looks suitably awful. There we go, a bit of light to that as well, just with the environment map I'm using. Again, sort yourself out, honestly, for lighting. There are Blender tutorials all over YouTube, the internet, just everywhere. I'll be happy to link you to some if you need them. So next thing we need to do is unwrap the model, so you'll want to open up the image editor as well. Close that. I'm sorry for that geometry, but try different unwrap methods. Sometimes one will look really, really bad, and then I usually have good results with Smart UV project and give it a bit of a margin so you don't get overlap from different regions while baking. That will do. Add a new image. Okay. Then what we need to do is, and this is just a bit of how Cycles is, and Blender can be a bit odd for baking, to tell Blender to bake to this texture, we put it on the material that we're baking from. I have no idea why it really has to do that, but and then you need to make sure that the image node remains selected. Then we go over to the render panel and down to bake. go back to object mode now. Make sure it's set to combined. If you set it to any of the others, you will get another kind of render data baked to it. But combined gives you everything. Margin, I don't know if that's not the default or if I just set it that high. 3 will do. Make sure selected to active is turned off in this case. You'd know when you'd need to turn it on if you do actually need it. I turn clear off because it makes it easier if you've got multiple objects on the same texture, which is a slightly more advanced technique, but can save a lot of time. And then click bake and wait. Now we've got our texture, so if we can go to textured mode. If you turn shadeless off, that is actually how it will end up looking when imported into AltspaceVR. That looks good enough. Save the image. Save as. Yeah, that will do. No, we don't need. Don't turn copy off. That can be annoying. You might want to turn relative path on, though. I find that's very useful. There we go. And now comes a annoying part. You have to switch over to Blender's render the internal. Go to your materials tab, turn the nodes off, this little button here. When you have to bake the texture again, you will have to open this up and turn the nodes back on. There's also a button for that over when you're in cycles. It's a big use nodes button. Then over to the textures panel, add a new texture, give it a name. Select your rock texture and hit tab, and yes, you have to change it in the image editor again. Again, a slightly odder behaviour of Blender. And now at this point you can just go to File, Export, and either Collada or OBJ. With either of them, you need to make sure that the export settings are set suitably. Selection only, so that way only the objects that you've actually selected will get exported. Do not need shape keys. It's best to apply modifiers as well. Only selected UV map. If you've ever been in the island, you may notice occasionally the trees texture goes wrong. That's because I forgot to tick that. And also selected a different UV map. Include material textures and copy. You should be triangulating your meshes before you export, but tick it as well. I don't tick either of those. And there you go. Now you have a collada file, and in the same directory, the baked image, which you can then import into AltSpace with A-frame. The process is slightly different for OBJ files, but it's generally fairly similar. Selection only, Include UVs, write materials, triangulate faces, change path mode to copy. So again, it will copy your image texture and then export. That's pretty much it. If you start doing more advanced things, there are some issues you may run into, but just come and find me. I'll do my best to help.